first conversation for today as we're joined by representatives of the Statistical Institute of Belize. We have with us Dr. Leopold Perriott, who is the Director General, and we also have Miriam Willoughby, who is the Census and Surveys Manager. Good morning and welcome.
Thank you.
Now, we're very much ahead of the ball when it comes to the rollout of the actual census, but you have some competitions that are ongoing as a way to promote the work that will take place. I wanted to start off this conversation this morning reminding people of what this process is and why it's so important in understanding the country that we're living in. So let's start there.
Okay, well, the census is a mammoth, one of the biggest operations we ever put on land. We have it. It's supposed to occur once every 10 years, and so the last one was done in 2010, and so this one is due for 2020. We've started the preparations from 2015 or so.
2016.
2016, and. So we're almost ahead of the ball. We're still a little behind. And this is really a baseline. These are all baseline data for just about all the operations we have in the country, for insurance, for government policies. We get an idea of how many people there are, where they're distributed, get an idea of how our social interactions are going on, whether there's poverty, get a good idea of poverty, and down to a very fine level. We can determine poverty now. We think we have it organized like that. And we can get ideas of how to zone for education, for example. Where do you put your schools? Where do the children occur? And how do they grow over time? How do communities grow over time? That's the kind of thing we have.
What do the preparations entail? You said you've been preparing from 2016?
From the late part of 2016.
I thought it was just a paper you go to and you ask questions.
No, although the census is about 2 years away, we have started our preparations from the end of 2016 because it's recommended that at least 3 years you start planning. And it's a very involved process in planning. And we started that process early on because we know that for the last census, I don't think we gave ourselves enough time for planning. So this time around, we didn't want to make the same mistake. What that involves really is preparing to hit the field. So you have, first of all, you have to develop your questionnaire. And to do that, we have established a National Census Advisory Committee as a first step. We have representation from about 19 different non-government agencies. And what they will do, part of their responsibility, is to guide us in terms of what topics to include in the census. You have to make sure that your topics are relevant to today, to the development goals that we have set for the country. So part of their responsibility is to guide us on that, to seek funding, sources of funding. It's a very, very expensive venture. And so that's one of the first things that we established. We've had several meetings already, so right now they're reviewing the potential possible topics that we'll include for the census. We've also been working on the legislation needed for the census. We have to be authorized by the Census Act to conduct it. We just can't pick up and go out there, right? Yeah. So that's one of the other things. The Act has to outline what the topics to be included will be, who the interviewers, what the roles of the interviewers are, the enumerators, what the role of the field supervisors are. So all that right now we're getting in place. So it's a very involved process, like I mentioned earlier.
Now, tell us about some of the conversations that have been taking place in the updating of the tool. 10 years is a very large gap, and there's quite a lot that changes within society during that time. I mean, we'll always want to understand poverty and ethnicity and demographics, but there are also some social issues, some developmental issues that perhaps were more important in 2010 than they are now, and vice versa. So tell us about some of the emerging areas that we're seeing.
Well, one of the things that we've been looking at, we have these development goals set out in the 2030 agenda. We have it set out in the GSDS. list
What
of
is the
indicators.
GSDS?
Growth and
the
sustainable
development
sustainable
strategy.
development strategies.
Okay.
Government
Right.
strategy for short term of how things should proceed in the country.
Right.
Okay.
So to guide us on that, you'll always have things important like your basic demographic, how many persons live in a household, age, sex, those are important areas. Disability is another area that we see that's very important. Education, of course. We also have some interest in putting a health section in there, which we're discussing. I think it has to do with a certain type of
There's
cancer.
crime also.
There's crime.
There's some crime.
Because in the crime section in particular, we want to know whether the type of crime, if you've been a victim, whether it's been reported, because what we may get from the police report is just what is reported. So do a comparison to see, you know, the level of underreporting of crime. So those are current issues, I think, that are very important.
Is there anything in there on technology?
Yes, we do
Yes.
have an ICT section about access to internet.
The use of internet.
And
this
the
kind
use
thing.
of it.
And use of Facebook and Spotify.
Yeah, internet usage. How do you use the internet, phone, computer? You know how that has changed over time. So
How do you get, where do you get your news from, get your information from, that kind of thing?
Right.
Is it from open your eyes? Or
we also cover areas about environment. Where do you get your information on the environment? What you perceive to be environmental issues. So it really covers a broad spectrum of topics and issues that are relevant for today.
And I think you can appreciate that a questionnaire that tries to cover everything, you know, it's very, 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 very difficult, and it's very contentious and political and everything else all in one, and so it requires a bit of work.
And you can't include every single thing that you would like to monitor. So part of our responsibility, along with the National Census Advisory Committee and other smaller groups, is to decide what is it really that we want to include in the census questionnaire? What's the best source of information for this particular area? Or is it available in administrative data already? Can we get it from a survey? You know, so we can't include every single thing, but you know, to select the things that are important for the census, where we want to know about all the members of the population. So that's quite challenging.
Is there anything from the 2010 census that you guys saw that the stakeholders and the persons around the table are saying, let's expand on that a little bit more for the 2020 census?
There are some things. The issues of poverty is an issue that always comes up, and I don't think we did much of that last time around. Okay, and so they're trying. We're going to be approaching poverty from two different levels. From the poverty line level, where is how much money you make at the end of the start, how much calories, and then from a multi-dimensional aspect where we look at the different aspects that contribute to poverty, whether it's education or health, or whether your house broke up, as the case might be, you know, from different dimensions. So they call that multi-dimensional.
Yes,
so that's the idea.
I'm glad you touched on that, because that's actually one of the questions I wanted us to be able to explore. When we talk about poverty in this country, I think there's some very hard and fast rules that people use looking at how much money you make and what you can be able to afford. But there are different levels of poverty that people are struggling and sometimes kind of just picking and choosing how they're going to manage over a longer period of time. Do you feel like the census accurately covers or accurately captures what the living situation is of Belizeans?
I think it's our best shot at getting a comprehensive look at where the poverty areas are.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be more of a comparative than give you. It isn't a a definite number that we have. It's a comparative. It compares across the country the different areas of poverty. Okay, and so we can make a map basically and say, here what happened. These are the most poor areas, and put them in quartiles or whatever you want to call it, quintiles, and then we can have. Then we can say, okay, these areas are the affluent areas. These areas are the really poor, and these are the destitute, whatever it is.
Yeah.
And we can do this the census down to the block level, basically.
And you know, when you speak of rural areas, for example, I always recall examples of speaking with people in Toledo who often feel that being called poor or the poorest district is not something that they identify with, because there's a difference between traditional living and somebody who lives in an urban area like Belize City. And that's what I meant in terms of accurately capturing.
Yeah.
Can you speak more on that?
That is a difficult one. That's a difficult one. No?
Yeah.
The idea I have is to put a bunch of people together who have their own interests at heart and have a discussion with respect to this. And as a matter of fact, we're putting that together with the help from an international agency to decide on what are the important issues they think involves in poverty. Okay, what levels would they consider to be when somebody is poor? What do you have to have? What kind of things you have to have in place to be considered to be poor in any of the different areas? What is education? You know, you might. Some people might say you're poor educationally if you haven't attended a primary school up to standard 6, and nobody in the house is attending any school whatsoever, or you might be health poor if you have one or more child dying in your family within the last 5 years, kind of things like that. And so, what has to be done? There has to be a consensus as to what involves. And so the idea is to get as many representatives from different sectors as possible to get their view in.
Since you touched on education, another indicator that I have questions about is the literacy rate. Completion of Standard 6 does not equate being sufficient in your literacy. And we've seen that time and time again. We have remedial programs that are working with people. When we look at that particular indicator, how are we approaching it this time? What are the plans?
Okay, the issue of using Standard 6 or whatever the number is as being it's a proxy measure. It doesn't measure literacy.
Okay.
It's a proxy. It gives you an idea that if the person might be literate, might be able to read, but the actual test is you have to give somebody something to read. Okay, you have to, when you do it in real, for real, you have to have a simple sentence and have them read it and then evaluate how they read it, or numeracy, to have them do a simple calculation of some sort.
Okay.
So for that type of study, it would be better to do a literacy survey.
Which is very pointed and have time, because with a census,
but at least we can get a proxy for.
You get the proxy to say how many people have completed Standard 6.
Standard 5, exactly.
Standard
7 years of schooling is what we use as the measure.
In terms of, I'm always curious to know how Croffy, as I call it, how Belizeans, what is their attitude towards giving information, participating? Are they skeptical, which is the normal thing? Somebody calls you or somebody shows up at your house, you the wash, you the cook, your beans bun, and so you have a very limited time with them. What has been the approach? Has it changed over time of Belizeans to the censuses and the surveys?
Well, I think overall, I would have to say people are quite open when we go to their homes, but you do have some cases where we're not welcome, and I think probably it's because one of the reasons we found, and that's why we're big on sensitizing the public about what's going on. People are not aware of it, so you show up to their house and they're like, "What? I didn't know this was happening. What's this about?" So
some political party must have sent you.
that's another thing.
It's a very curious thing. When I first started, which was eons ago, right?
How long, Dr. P?
Too long to mention. Right? I was in in the Orange Walk district, and doing interviews and what have you. And it's difficult. The people they're just very, very nice. They invite you for tea, and all kind of thing, right? And I rather suspect the impression I get is that people on a whole are very receptive to these kind of things. We ask some seriously hard questions sometimes.
But to address your question about, if somebody's big, we train our interviewers. So if I see that, you're trying to make lunch, and I show up at 11:30 and I see it's not a good time, we train them to detect those kind of things and say, okay, Mr. Authors, can I come back at a particular time? And, we work with you. We work after 5. We work on weekends.
You can see when they're tired, and you
can see when they're tired, right? We're going through, and you're yawning and all that, and then we say, okay, would you like to continue at another time? So we're very flexible, but I would say overwhelmingly we are very welcome.
Yeah, it's interesting because we were asking this question on the household budget survey last week, and I really find it surprising that people would disclose financial information. Instead, they've had good success.
But
they've had
how
good
you
participation
approach
rate so far.
someone is very important, and we're big on that on our training.
Yeah.
You have to approach with confidence. You have to know what it is you're talking about. You have to know about the information that you're collecting so that you can explain the purpose of why you're doing it. And that's why our training is very long, but it's for a good reason.
This type of the census is one of it's the most important survey, I would imagine, that you undertake. And we spoke earlier of looking at how technology has impacted households, but how has technology changed your own methodology?
Oh, that's been that's been a huge improvement.
Yes,
for the 2010 census, we used paper questionnaires. So we had just boxes and boxes of questionnaires in the office.
Not eco-friendly.
I know.
Or counting friendly. Sorry, aggregation.
But for 2020, and actually since 2015, we've changed our methodology. We're using tablets now, electronic versions of the questionnaire, and we plan to do the same for the census. Of course, that's going to increase our costs tremendously because each enumerator will be and supervisor will have to have a tablet.
Cuts time though.
But it cuts time in data processing,
Yes.
because as you're capturing the information, you're entering it. First, we have to bring in the questionnaires, then enter it, and there's a lag time there. But now, beyond that, we can look at certain things like how the census is going in a particular area. So there are certain indicators within the system that we're looking at. That we can monitor more in real time versus when the data has been entered from paper. So that's one of the big improvements that we're going to make for this round.
Are you also, there's the GIS survey workshop taking place right now. Have you also introduced that as a part of your, because you spoke of mapping earlier, and
yes,
I imagine that
the mapping is a very important part. We're insisting that we have an idea, georeference each and every dwelling, every house.
Okay.
Get all the information for the streets, so that our interviewers can identify immediately where some place is. They don't have to be going search. That will speed up the process to start off with, and it also allow us to link the information onto a geographical reference, so that we can create maps. I can tell you, if you want to look at poverty or want to look at education, I can tell you where things are on the ground because I have the point at which it happened.
Okay, so all the information that we collect from a dwelling unit or a household or a building will be linked to a coordinate. So that's why, let's say you want to know in a particular area how many people don't have electricity or something like not connected to electricity. You can do that once you have it georeferenced. So that's one of the good things I think that we'll be able to utilize technology more.
When you're doing the survey, do you stick to traditional areas? And why do I ask this? I'm always questioning sometimes the full accuracy. It must be accurate to a very high degree, but the full picture is not given because Belize is a landlocked country. And so immigration, for example, is an issue that will affect your numbers. Because we might think we have 285,000, but we might have 30,000 immigrants, illegal immigrants or the like. And that affects the strain on your resources and it affects the way that you plan. Does the census have a way to try to deal with these? I don't know if it's black market or these, I don't know how you refer to them. Non-legal factors on your numbering, one. And two, as you're dealing with things like, you say like people on the electricity grid, there's a huge thing like squatters. I was on the bus about a week ago going to Orange Walk, and the bus stopped at about mile 30 and there was nothing around. And the guy got off, grocery bag and everything, and walked into the bush. And I was thinking that there must be a settlement somewhere behind there.
Probably a big town.
Probably a big town. Does the census take into consideration these sort of X factors, black market factors?
Whether you're a citizen or not of this country, you're counted as long as you meet the criteria of being a usual resident, which is anything more than 6 months or more. right? So it doesn't matter. We don't ask you what your citizenship is. We ask you what your country of birth is to give us some approximation of the foreign-born population that's living here, right? So whether you're here legally or not, we don't capture that in the census.
And some of these questions aren't asked in terms of legal status.
Yeah.
No, we don't
these
include
questions
that,
aren't
but we
asked.
ask you what's your country of birth.
Yeah, because whether you're here legally or otherwise, you still make use of our health, you still make use of our education, and we have to plan for,
We
people have to plan for that.
right? So.
And you're still a part of the
And
indicators for the country.
you're still a part of the
Yes,
economy.
yes.
Okay, so we have to, and people have to plan for this, and so we need to know.
Yes.
Can I ask a
Go
follow-up?
ahead.
Sorry, can I ask a follow-up question too? The information that is used on the census, and I know the work that you guys do is not only in 10-year gaps, but there's a lot of work that you guys do in between, actual work, not just planning. How much of that is utilized by other persons, for example, and specifically the university? Do they play with the numbers? Do they cross-reference them and come up with all of these nice?
Yeah.
What is the interaction and the use of the census in the lull time between 2010 and 2020?
Let me tag on there because that's where I was going. I know the last time we released the census data, one of the identified challenges is that your responsibility is to produce the raw data, and you are not a research institute. And we have heard oftentimes that perhaps there's not sufficient research taking place. Has that changed?
There is yes and no, I suppose.
This seems to be one of the issues that's
Yeah,
been burning for you.
that is
Well,
always
yeah.
making maximum use of the data is always a pressing issue. Why produce this stuff is nobody use it? Well, in fact, we have put in place certain measures to make sure that people can have access to data. So, for example, we have on our website, and it's going to be up there. We have to take it down because it fell apart. But there are complete data sets. The 2010 data set should be on the data set.
Data set.
Data sets.
The data set, yes. It's anonymized, and so people can go and make whatever tables you want.
Anonymized? Dr. P using straight big words this morning.
Anonymized, it means to take out information that can identify
Who
any
you are.
person or business.
Okay. Anonymity.
Okay? And so and so we take out names, addresses, telephone numbers, that kind of thing from the data set. And so because people, when they don't need that information for their research purposes, okay? Most people don't. We have received on a continuous basis, we also have a micro access data policy where people can apply for the use of data sets, whether it's the census or whether it's labor force or whether it's a mixed data set. And then they can either come in and sit down around the table with a computer. We supply the computer, we supply the software, and they can fiddle around and do their business. And then they can leave with their results. They can't take the data set with them, but they can leave with the results. And this has been made. This has been done for the UII, for UB, people from Germany, from all over the place. Costa Rica, people apply for this to make use of the data sets.
But the access
But you
to
didn't answer my question
Yeah.
whether or not we're seeing sufficient research being
I don't
done
think it's
with-
sufficient. That's what no. That's a
Yeah.
no part. I don't think it's
Yeah.
sufficient. I don't think it's sufficient by a long shot.
Well, and we asked the questions earlier, but that's where a deeper study of things like your poverty indicators, like your maybe a labor survey coupled with your household survey can be able to really give us clearer pictures.
Yeah.
And who do you find requesting the information the most locally?
Unfortunately, I don't think that locally we make as much use as we can make of it. People abroad probably make use of it more than people locally. We've had some requests from University of Belize, one or two from University. I don't think we've had from Galen lately,
I haven't seen.
and from anybody. But it's very few people in Belize actually use it. Okay.
Is it because we're just using the total numbers and perhaps not delving deeper into the data sets that you have available?
It could be that, but we also have a microdata access policy on our website. So there's a form that you fill in indicating the purpose of your study so that you can have access to the detailed level. Of course, it's still anonymized. You cannot identify an individual from it, but we don't see people making enough use of it, and we have several census data sets that you could look at it over a period of time. So it's really good research material that we have.
But surely, when you say no one, you must not be referring to government. Government must be using this as a Bible. Government agencies, surely the health, education departments, immigration human development must be using this as a Bible.
I think human development, if I recall, they've used.
I think they've used it. They've used
probably
it.
Out of the most, right?
Yeah, they're probably the most that have used it the most. Yeah.
And what's the most requested data? Is it demographics?
Labor and gender.
Ethnicities?
It's mostly demographics.
Yeah.
Mostly demographics. People want to know where people are at a particular time. And most of it sometimes we need to do the extrapolations, another big word.
Oh my goodness.
To find out what give an estimate of population is in September, for example, of last year.
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
and so there's this intercensal estimations. We have another big word, estimations. We have.
Thank you for the education.
You messed up, didn't you?
So, Doc, are we? From what you're telling me, I'm hearing that we're underutilizing the raw
I think we are
data.
grossly underutilizing
We
the
are.
data.
We are.
What are we missing out on? What all can we do? Maybe speaking about this morning, maybe we'll trigger some of the bright minds at Galen or at SJC, or at the UB,
Even high school
or
level.
high school to use some of this. I remember when I was at university in Barbados, that this was the way you got your grade was you had to use actual data. You had to actually go into the equivalent of the S.I.B. in that country. Do we have a cultural problem, one? And two, what are we missing out on? What is the sky? What is the limit in terms of the use of this raw data?
You have some hard questions. I know. Some questions.
Get them up there,
I don't want to answer. I think we have it's a huge resource for all kind of research in social issues. If we want to talk about education or health, okay, we want to talk about crime, get an idea. And one of the powers of this is that we have several data sets from the census, for example. We have data sets from that's available from 1991. Okay, and the longitudinal studies are the really interesting one. How do communities grow? How does the pattern of crime vary inside the country? I mean, say it morphs from this area, then it morphs to this area, whatever it is. And so there's a following this in a longitudinal fashion is absolutely fascinating.
Or even looking at how much the demographic has changed over the years.
And it's
we don't get
important.
that kind. I've always wondered why no one has done a study on that. One of the most fascinating results that we saw from the 2010 census, I believe, was almost 50% of people who live in Belize speak Spanish.
That is.
How's that evolve?
And we still don't cater to Spanish speakers in this country. Now, it didn't go far enough to say that people spoke English and Spanish. It only said 50% can speak Spanish. So
that would be a nice study for some young brain somewhere to do that.
But people in like the university working on their thesis or their dissertation can make use of this, especially those doing social research. We'd love for them to make use of it because it's very expensive to produce it. So use it.
Well, I would imagine even as data gatherers, you probably see results that you say, "Wow, I wonder why," and hope that somebody would delve further into the numbers to do the research. Tell us some of the surprising indicators that you saw on a personal level, obviously, from the last census.
I think for me, then, I think one was I saw the secondary school enrollment rate was about 75% compared to about 95% for primary. And then you wonder, well, what's causing the gap for school-age children to not be attending school at that age at the secondary school? So those are things that you'd want to delve into.
Enrollment or completion?
Enrollment.
Enrollment.
So those are certain things that you'd want to look a little bit deeper into and see, well, are they working? And these are children, I think, between 13 and 16 that are of secondary school age, and they're not in school. So what is the reason? Is it that they're working, or is it that they can't afford school? So things like that. For me personally, that's a question that I always say, well, why isn't there a continuation from primary right into secondary, but then there are factors such as cost and transportation to school and, things like that. So that's an area personally, I don't know if you saw one, Doc.
My area personally is I'm very, excuse me, I have a frog. Personally, I'm concerned about the males in the society. We have a serious dropout by the end of primary school. The males are beginning to really disappear into the system, and I always wonder why. Is it our educational system, or what are we doing to alienate our males in this fashion? I commented to one person that probably one of the only places where males are given opportunity to do kind of trades is in the prison. Okay, and why should that be? I mean, there has to be something that's going on, and that to me is a very important area to address.
Because now we're starting to interesting things.
Just when we talk about meals.
Yeah. I was going to jump into meals because I think one of the issues that is heavily we don't look at in this country is drug and alcohol use. And you spoke of health indicators, and I'm wondering if we will finally, perhaps, maybe you can take it back to the table, talk about the level of drug use in the country, and especially with young males.
Yeah, that's not something that we have currently, but it's something to take back for sure.
As I hear both of you speaking very excitingly about the data, I realize that the data is creating more questions than it does answers. It's kind of like a door opener. But
we don't take the step through.
Yes, that's my. It's Belize a guessing society. We come up with a policy. We're not an empirical base. Your specialty is numbers, and that's
all we do is numbers.
That's all we do. But is culturally Belize? Are we a guessing society? We prefer to guess, and that guessing culture goes further to the information we share, the questions we ask, and the helplessness that we feel as a society. As part of the next segment of what we do here is to deal with preparations to get people involved in knowing the value of the census. But how far can we go to change that culture from, you can ask that question, you can dig deeper. We come from a colonial society where the head office controlled everything and then they determined everything afterwards. We didn't ask any questions. How do we change our culture using the census information to start to ask the second layer questions?
Yes, that is an extremely important point that you're making. No, and the idea that we don't use numbers. This is an all-pervading idea from the senior level right down to the very bottom. Okay, the shush factor.
Or anecdotal.
Anecdotal factor. That is the thing right there. Okay, and so how do we get the government senior officials to use the data to inform their strategies, inform their decisions, their policies?
Yeah.
It's extremely difficult, and it's something that isn't going to happen overnight. It's something we have to work at over a period of time, and hopefully we are working at that. We are putting in place what we call the National Statistical System, which tries to get people's attention and to get them buy into the idea that this information is absolutely invaluable, and it pertains directly to all of the policies that they have. They can measure, they can evaluate using this information. They don't have to be guessing. You don't have to guess that the average household size is 6 point something because it suits it's 4 point something, and we tell you.
Or that traditionally Belizean live in extended families.
Extended families,
or single parent families.
And how that is structured.
Yeah.
How it's structured. You don't have to be supposing and composing and shushing. You have the numbers.
I have a great one for you. I think Kevin, you'll enjoy this tidbit. So one of the anecdotal statistic that people love to dish out in this country is, we live in a country where it's 2 women to every man. But not true. Just the surface level data. And I understand the convenience of men spewing this,
Depends on how you calculate
this
it.
truth
It depends on how you calculate it.
or lie. Go ahead. It is. What is the real demographics in Belize?
We're about even.
Right, just
Thank you.
absolutely one-on-one.
Thank you.
That's a mathematical analysis. That doesn't
So that's that.
that doesn't factor in availability.
Are we not? Well, we didn't talk about availability. We didn't talk about. Do you see why people stick with surface level data and don't want to ask the next question? But I thought that was a fun one because I still hear it sometimes when tourists come. They say, "Oh, they told me that Belize have two." No.
No, it's
So-
one-to-one.
All right.
Henry disagrees.
Let's talk about the competition. And, I appreciate that we've taken all the time to speak of the importance, some of the challenges, and this can be a great tool that people can use to come up with creative slogans and jingles and logos. Tell us about the competition.
All right, so we have the slogan competition. The last one, if you remember, for 2010 was quite short and nice, and that's what we're looking for, a catchy phrase. So we
What was
had
it?
it's 2010, let's count again.
Yeah. I remember the
that
song.
was
It's
nice.
playing in my head
Yeah,
right now.
right.
That was nice.
So that was nice. So we're looking for we're looking for something short like that again. We have the winner actually getting $500, but it has to be something original. Unfortunately, we can't participate in,
Wow.
in any of them.
Just
But-
whisper it to me and I will.
But this is a way where we see that we want to get people involved in it and have some sense of ownership of it. That
Yeah.
if you're a part of it from the start, then chances are you're accepting of the whole process. So this is one way. I mean, we could easily come up with something in house, but what fun would that be? But yeah, so this is a slogan competition. It opened on the 28th of March, and by the 13th of July, you can submit your
Slogan.
your versions of it to us. And then we have the logo competition. Last year, it's a population and housing census. So last year, we had a nice little house with some colors in there. You're limited to about 4 colors. So we want it colorful, but don't go too crazy.
And that's $1,000.
And that's $1,000 for the winner. But even those, we have a Facebook page at S.I.B. So once you submit your entry, we put it on our Facebook page as well. And the ones that receive the most likes, even if they don't win, they get a Kindle Fire,
Okay.
which is nice. And then we also have prizes. For the jingle. For the jingle, we need something again catchy that's within, I think, 90 seconds. And again, it's something that people can feel the vibes. That's a little bit more. That's
I feel the cash
2,000.
prize. 2,000.
That's incentive, right? $2,000. And again, we'll put it on our Facebook page, and the most likes get a Kindle Fire.
So you get prizes, obviously, if you win the competition, but you also get a prize for most liked, and you also get a prize if you're the youngest and the oldest.
If you didn't win, yes, we will give you some souvenirs from
All
the
right,
site.
and the deadline that we're looking at for
is
all
July
3 of these-
13, and then we'll announce the winner. We'll officially launch the census in October of this year,
Okay.
the 17th of October. So at that time, we'll announce the winners of these competitions.
And how do people submit their entries?
They can submit it through our website, or in the case of the logo, if you want to send it in via mail, you can do that. But the easiest way would be just to email us.
All right.
This is exciting.
There you go.
Well, I'm glad you're feeling it.
You're gonna tap into your songwriting skills.
So
now,
we do expect
I would sing it.
Thank you so much for coming in and sharing all this information, and
Thank
best
you.
of luck in being able to get a great entries.
Thank
for
you very much for having
the
us.
3 categories.
Good luck.
All right, we're going to go ahead and take a break. And when we come back, we'll be talking to a travel adventure cooking TV show host. She has a show called The Posh Pescatarian. That's coming up after the break.